Welcome, Slayer the Alchemist. And I have a question for you. Where you live in your scene, are you seeing an alarming number of smaller size music venues closing? I'm talking about places that are like 150, 300 capacity, places where mostly local bands play or very small kind of touring bands might come through and play. We've had two of these close in the last like 2 months in the Tampa area, and we're set to have another long established place that has announced that they're going to be closing in like a year. They're more like maybe like a 350 to 450 style venue. And as with most things in life, you think that it's just happening where you live, but the world is a big place. So usually when something's happening in one place, I think it's probably happening in other places. And I started Googling it a little bit, like, are small venues closing in your town? Why are small venues closing? And I saw some things on Reddit. I saw somebody write an article about it, and it was talking about how, yeah, this is a thing that small venues, they're closing at kind of a alarming rate. And there's a number of factors playing into this. The economy was one thing that people brought up. That especially since post pandemic, it was very difficult for these venues during the pandemic. So after the pandemic, it was hard for them to kind of get back on their feet. And I agree with all these things. I do think that those are contributing factors. But somebody wrote this article, and I should have quoted the article or looked at who wrote it. But they basically said, and I agree with them, all those other things are factors. But the sad truth is that there just isn't as much of a market for these type of venues. These venues where local bands play, local cover bands, local original bands. These venues where small time touring acts can come through, bands that are doing van tours. I'm not talking about like we have a venue in Tampa that does the 600 to 800 size crowds where somebody like Creator might this venue's maybe a little small for Creator, but Blood Incantation played there. You'll see people, Deicide, the local death metal, Morbid Angel played there not that long ago. Venues of that size, they seem to be doing okay because there's a market for touring bands like the European bands that come over and play that kind of circuit, that kind of like 500 to 1,000 seat place. We still have the Hard Rock Live, we still have the House of Blues. There's those places, but they're sort of funded. They're connected to Disney or whatever. They're the Hard Rock Hotel and all that kind of stuff. The Hard Rock Casino. Those places are sort of funded from other places. I'm talking about standalone, independent, small music venues that cater to that local small touring bands. It seems like those places are a lot of them are closing. And like I mentioned, the economic factors, the stuff that happened the last couple years and everything are certainly a part of it. But like this person mentions in the article, and I have to agree with them, there's no kind of demand. There's not as much of a demand for these types of places anymore. And it's a sad reality, but the younger generation, we talk about the younger generation, me sitting here on my porch yelling at old man yells at clouds, get off of my lawn guy. We talk about how the younger generation doesn't buy music as much and things like that. And this is also not something for them going out to see live bands. It is just, it's unfortunate, but it is not as popular as when I was younger in the 80s and in the 90s. This is unfortunately just not as much of a thing. Now, you're going to say, well, young kids don't go out. Not true. I have my daughter is in her mid 20s. She's, I don't know, she's 25, I think, 25, 26. Her friends go out all the time. They just go to places that are electronic music, DJs, electronic music. She's very much into, she goes to festivals for these things. I don't know what you call it, EDM, that type of thing. You know, her and her friends are very much into this. There's venues in Tampa that pretty much only do that kind of stuff. You know, every now and then, maybe a big band or a big touring artist might play these venues, but they're very busy. They charge high covers, they charge high drink prices. And when I'm walking around in these downtown areas, there'll be 150 kids on the street waiting to get into these places. So they're open till 3, and they start at like 9, and then they stop at like 3 in the morning. There'll be like 12 DJs or 12 of these EDM acts playing on one night. So those seem to be doing well. But when you're talking about places with live bands, live touring bands, these places are not doing well. And when I am at these places and there are people there, it tends to skew older. Now, maybe that's because I'm going to see bands that appeal to me and I'm an older guy. I'm sure that, and I know that there are bands that appeal to a younger crowd, and they can draw a little bit more from that. But basically, this is a hard draw because kids at that age, they don't go out to hear live bands as much as we did. Thus, these places are struggling and closing, and I don't really know how much of a future there is for, you're a small time indie band. These, like, let's say indie rock. These bands were famous for getting in a van and driving around and doing tours and stuff like that. And there's, in every city there seemed to be a handful of small venues where these bands could play. I don't know how much of a future there is for that type of thing anymore. You know, we have this venue, the Brass Mug in Tampa. It's famous for, that's all the death metal bands played there in the 90s and stuff as they were coming up. And that's kind of a place where bands like that can kind of do that. You know, if you're a small time band, you can roll into town and some local promoter will throw a couple other local metal bands on and you can have a night. But man, I've been to a few of those, and usually there's not many people there, and the people there are, again, they skew older. They lean towards the older crowd. So I just don't know if there's a future for stuff like this. And it's sad because I like venues like that. You've heard me complain and do videos about these big concerts and how expensive shows are getting, even at these mid-size level, these 600 to 800 seat local clubs. I mean, a Wednesday night show, you're dropping $25, $30, $35 sometimes for these shows, surcharges with whoever you're buying the tickets through and stuff like that. I mean, it gets expensive. So I like these smaller venues where maybe there's only 150 people, you know, those types of crowds. I sort of dig that. And it's sad to see these places disappearing, but unfortunately, I think it's just where it's at right now, that young kids, the 20 to 30-year-old demographic, they don't go to hear live music. They don't go to live music venues, live bands. I'm talking bands. I'm not talking about EDM and electronic music and stuff like that, because that seems to be doing well. So I'm curious, what's it like where you are? Are smaller live venues closing in your town? Are you like me? Do you have kids that are in their 20s, or you got friends that have kids that are in their 20s, or you know people that are in their 20s? Where are they going? What do they do on Friday and Saturday nights? Do some of them, I mean, I know that there are still some that like bands and stuff like that, but man, it's not like what it used to be. So let me know what it's like where you are. If you've got any insights on this, why you think this is happening, why you think it's going in this direction, let me know in the comments down below. I guess just reinforces the thing. If you've got a small independent local venue in your town, you need to support it. You know, don't take these places for granted, because it just may turn around. In some place that has been around forever, all of a sudden you see an announcement they're closing at the end of the year or something like that. So let me know what it's like where you are. Let me know your thoughts on this subject down below in the comments. Till we see you again, make sure you rock hard, ride free.